Queer and trans people have always existed, especially beyond the scope of the colonial gender binary and so their sexualities. Many indigenous communities have always revered and respected those who existed beyond the colonial concepts of gender and celebrated those who had intimate and sexual relationships that wouldn't be considered cis or straight. Yet with the arrival of European colonizers and their religious fanatics, a lot of that has changed and unfortunately still affects us today. The violence that we are witnessing towards trans people is not new, just repackaged. And we need to, together, support, celebrate, and honor Black, Indigenous, queer, and trans people of color. There is a need to organize. There's a need to be in community. There's a need for us to really transform this world for the better. And I hope you join me and others as we work towards this future that supports, celebrates, uplifts, and honors Black, Indigenous, queer, and trans people of color. Thank you for listening. I hope you have a beautiful day, despite the violence.
The existence of third genders in various cultures around the world are often pointed to in an attempt to legitimize people from completely different cultures choosing to identify outside of their sex. After all, they claim, trans people have always existed. There are third genders in so many of the colored countries. What they fail to note is that a historical precedent doesn't necessarily make a claim true. For example, just because many cultures have practiced human sacrifice doesn't make it moral or excusable to do so today. Additionally, these claims ignore the context of these third genders, which primarily served as routes for women to escape the constraints placed on the female sex, which is why there are far fewer examples of female third genders, or as a way to separate feminine gay men from regular men and women, stemming from homophobia and misogyny.
Welcome to Learn Boosters, where knowledge takes flight. Today we're jetting off to the land of eagles, Albania. Did you know Albania has a sworn virgin tradition, where women can live as men if they take a vow of chastity?
In Albanian society, women who follow the cult of Leke Dukajini, or simply the Kanun, can identify as sworn virgins. Because gender and sex were considered the same in this context, dressing masculine in Albania made you a man. As noting in Crossing Boundaries, Albania's Sworn Virgins. For Albania's Kanun followers, dress is an important gender marker. Like many societies throughout the world, here there are two genders, masculine and feminine, which are signified by dress. Men wear trousers, wristwatches, and close-fitting caps. Women wear skirts, aprons, headscarves, and in some more traditional households, veils. Thus, if a woman dresses like a man, she is a man. Her dress changes her gender. And in Albania, women who have become men are called virginisha, or sworn virgins. Becoming a sworn virgin was the only way to avoid marriage, either arranged or just in general, without offense, and offered the ability to run the household as a surrogate son. The connection between identifying as a sworn virgin and the need to escape misogyny is evident in how, as Balkan countries such as Albania, Kosovo, and Montenegro have modernized, and women have gained much more autonomy over the past couple decades, the tradition has become nearly extinct, with only an estimated 12 sworn virgins left in the world. In India, the Hijra are viewed with ambivalence, as they are considered capable of bestowing blessings and curses. They are deeply tied to Hindu mythology and Indian culture. The most prominent story, as noted in Transsexualism and Hindu mythology, is as follows. In the Ramayana, Lord Rama was banished from the kingdom and he was asked to spend 14 years in the forest. His followers followed him to the forest, but he requested all the men and women to return back to the city of Ayodhya. The transgendered individuals, Hijras, stayed back with Lord Rama. Lord Rama was greatly moved by their love and loyalty and sanctioned them with the power to confer blessing on auspicious occasions, like marriage, childbirth, and inaugural functions. Now, historically, eunuchs and intersex individuals were used as not full men, who were servants thought to be made less dangerous by their impotence. Variations of eunuchs can be seen throughout many ancient civilizations, and Hijra served a similar role in the distant past. However, in modern day, Hijras are typically prostitutes, and the face of all the difficulties and dangers that come along with working in that industry. The community itself is insular and runs like many brothels, but under the guise of connection, community, and guidance. Sarah Hilton and Jeffrey Gentleman reported back on this phenomenon in 2018, where they wrote, "There's a bit of a pyramid sales scheme within the Hijra community. Younger chelas, or disciples, are managed by mid-ranking Hijras who report up to gurus, who are often steered by their own elder mentors. For every Hijra, the idea is to get as many chelas working for you as possible. The money flows up, the protection from abusive customers or police officers flows down."
Hijras have been present in South Asian history for over 700 years, Emma. Here are some non-binary societies that still exist today. Many Hijras are born with male sexual characteristics, though the Hijra community also includes intersex people.
I was born a man, now I'm a woman.
So they'd often leave home at a young age and join other Hijra communities, like monks, and they would take a religious roles in things like births and marriages. Hijras are viewed to have the power to bless or curse people.
A newborn baby is first given to a transgender, and the baby's been blessed.
However, in recent centuries, there has been a growing stigma around the Hijra identity. Enter the British colonisers.
Ruining everything.
The British colonisers actually introduced a law when they colonised India to categorise Hijras as criminals. An anti-Hijra sentiment still continues today.
I feel proud to be a transgender. I don't think there's something abnormal in me. I never used to behave like a guy. I used to help my mom in the kitchen, help her in cooking.
How did you find your courage?
The passion to become a female made my mind strong.
German Indologist and Sanskritist Dr. Renate Syed wrote in her book titled Gender and Violence in Historical and Contemporary Perspectives. Hijra is a term in the languages of North India and has no equivalent in any other language as there is no translation at hand. Hijra is an antonym or endonym, while Western terms describing Hijiras are xenonym or exonyms that do not hit the target and miss the spot. The false equivalent of transgender cannot describe the Hijra, which is thereby lost in translation.
In Samoa, they were called Fa'afafine. If a young man says, born man, says, you know, folks, I would rather cook, I would rather sew, I would rather make dresses. And his family says, fine, society says, fine, that's it, it's over, it's done. That person, male, feeling they want to perform more traditionally feminine tasks, are accepted. People born bodily women who want to perform, feel like it is more amenable for them, who feel it is them to be able to perform and live openly and dress openly as a man, they are accepted in Samoa. How much more advanced is that? How much more complexity of thinking and of neurological structure does that take? As opposed to our Western binary, it's either this or that, or it's black or white, or it is or it isn't. There's another way we can think. And if we can think another way, we can accept other ways.
Another commonly mentioned culture includes the Fa'afafine of Samoa, which are men who are raised to fulfill a female gender role. The term translates as in the manner of a woman, and while Samoan law criminalizes sex between men, and culturally it isn't acceptable for a man to wear a woman's clothes, within the community one can go freely outside of those boundaries. When a man is notably feminine, he will likely be taught the traditional values of Samoan women, which often means working within the house. In other words, the role clearly serves as a way in which to categorize and include gender nonconforming and often homosexual men, a place in the community where rigid gender roles leave nonconformity as a harsh taboo. Although the community notes its long-standing existence within Samoan culture, this does not validate the creation of new gender identities today, especially as they are culturally and geographically unrelated and only serve to further prevent actual acceptance and tolerance of gender nonconformity.
If you've seen the acronym 2SLGBTQ+, you might have wondered, when did we start adding numbers in with the letters? Let's get smarter in seconds about 2S, which stands for Two-Spirit.
There are many diverse definitions of what it means to be Two-Spirit. For some indigenous peoples,
Being two-spirit means having both a masculine and a feminine spirit, and to others, it means existing outside the colonial binary. Two-spirit is an umbrella term that describes gender, sexuality, and spiritual identity, specific and unique to our indigenous communities and nations.
The term two-spirit is a translation from an Anishinaabe term, Nijmarduwa, which was told to Dr. Mara Laramie in a dream. She shared the term two-spirit to replace an outdated and offensive European anthropological term.
While the word wasn't used prior to 1990, the concept has existed in many forms and translations in various indigenous communities and their oral histories.
In many Native nations, our two-spirit relatives were accepted and respected.
Colonizers changed perspectives and acceptance within our communities.
The term, like indigiqueer, was created to distinguish Western concepts of gender and sexuality from the diverse and unique indigenous ways of being.
Indigiqueer and two-spirit are not terms for non-indigenous people to use, because our indigeneity is a core part of these identities.
Using this intentional terminology and being inclusive to our two-spirit relatives is an excellent step to affirming the legacy, present, and future of indigenous peoples across experiences of gender and sexuality.
Now, in America, many love to reference to Native American traditions, such as the two-spirit identity. However, in these discussions, few admit to the relative newness of the term, which was first coined in 1990 by Myra Laramie at the 3rd Annual Intertribal Native American First Nations Gay and Lesbian American Conference in Winnipeg, in an attempt to decolonize and destigmatize homosexuality in Native culture. The correlation between two-spirit and trans only began in the 1990s, and thus claims that this offers historical precedent for third cultures and gender identity as a whole are overstated and extrapolated by biased interpretation of the past. This claim centers on a single source from a lone traveler's 1825 recollection, which, as noted by scholar Gregory Smithers, is not enough to be considered trustworthy to prove the veracity of LGBT scholars and activists' claims that transgenderism always existed. He argues that as a result of the lack of historical proof, gender theorists and LGBT scholars, comprising social scientists, literary theorists, and cultural studies experts, have shaped recent scholarly understandings of two-spirit people, and that much of their work on two-spirits falls into the category of activist scholarship, with an unfortunate tendency to routinely associate two-spirits with homosexuality or sodomites, as 18th and 19th century ethnologists would have articulated this relatively modern socio-legal category. Anytime a supposed third gender or trans identity from the past is scrutinized, it becomes clear that all such examples are just as rooted in a desire to escape misogyny and homophobia as today's gender identities always are. Just because something existed in the past or has historical precedent doesn't make it valid to continue supporting it today, any more than historical precedent of slavery makes it valid to enslave another person now. Of course, many people refuse to acknowledge that gender is a social construct and one that is imposed upon you, and not freely chosen. The creation of alternative genders or social roles for those who do not conform only illustrates the nature of gender as a manner with which to control and incorporate those who typically don't belong in established categories. It's no more progressive to call a man who enjoys dresses and makeup a woman today than it was to do so 50 years ago, no matter what culture it hails from. This, dear viewers, is where we part. I've had this requested many times over, and there's definitely more examples out there, but I don't think you need to hear more. Pretty much anytime someone brings up, well, two-spirit exists, well, they had third genders in this country. Well, first off, are you from that country? Because 90% of the time the answer is no. It's someone from a Western country who's never been there. Secondly, the context matters. In I believe it was the South Pole, wherever Eskimos are from. I had a class back in college about cultural relativism, and one of the teachers I was taking the class with mentioned, oh, well, in this culture, some women have multiple husbands, and that's cultural relativism. It's different in certain cultures. And he forgot to add in the context that when there was times of famine, when they didn't have enough food over the winter, it would be the female children they leave out to die. And that's why they had an unequal amount of men and women. Because usually there's slightly more women than there are men. There was less women than there were men. Therefore, men would have to share a wife. And the context of that is important, because if you first hear, well, women could have multiple husbands, then you think, well, maybe they weren't so misogynistic. No, it's the opposite. They killed off so many girls that they had no choice but to share women. because, God forbid, a man go without a wife to have sex with. And I think that's a huge part of those kind of arguments that gets left out, because if you're actually listening, if you're actually paying attention, it's very, very clear that these are just ways to make sure there's another box, that nobody can live outside of the box. We just have another box with another label. And it was no more progressive to do so back in the 1700s or 1400s or 900s or back in cave times than it is right now. What is progressive is understanding that no matter how you dress, no matter what name you use, no matter what you look like, you can be a man or a woman. Your interests don't have to align with what is expected of you. But I think that might be too much for some people to understand. Anyhow, if you guys have any comments, questions, or concerns, leave them in the comment section down below. And I will see you guys next time. Bye!